Welcome back to the Tempo podcast. We've had a little bit of a hiatus, but now we are back and hopefully with a ton of new episodes to come in the very near future. Now, I'm joined today by a gentleman who I'm meeting just for the first time, but he comes very, very highly recommended from our CRO, Zach, who, as you may know, we've also had on the Tempo podcast as well. So I'm here with Jake. How you doing, sir? What's going on?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Ollie.
My pleasure. So we were just talking before we hit record here, and you've had quite the career in marketing. You've had quite the career before marketing as well. So can you give us the synopsis of what's your career been to date?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. But I think in a nutshell, it would be I've always had a passion for early stage venture creation, business creation. And from as early as I can remember, first job out of undergrad, reason I went back to get my MBA, all of it aligns to my interest in how do you build a business and how do you grow and scale it? And that's been my application through most of my career, whether it's marketing, sales, or any of the roles that contribute to that mission.
Good stuff. Okay. So you've held a bunch of marketing titles and You are now CRO. So tell me about how has that adjustment been? I know a fair few people who have been through it, and I don't know if you've managed salespeople directly or BDRs before in that capacity, but the whole dealing with a different function, to me, sales and marketing, we deal with each other so much that it's not totally alien, but to deal with a separate function, I guess at one point can feel like if I had to start dealing with our accounts, kind of daunting, like a whole different muscle memory and function and all of those things. Was that difficult, or did you take to it real good?
It's funny when you're using those terms even right now, as I'm sitting here reflecting on them, sales and marketing, they sound to me like so antiquated or at least narrowly defined. There's a stigma, I think, with marketing that's not necessarily a fair stigma, but it exists, which is marketing doesn't necessarily know sales, and sales, on the other hand, has the stigma of not necessarily understanding the marketing function. But for me, all of it's pointed at the same end goal. It doesn't matter what the function is on the go-to-market side. It's about revenue creation and revenue growth. And so for me in my career, I've been fortunate enough in my marketing roles to really have that hardcore focus on revenue. Not all marketing functions are like that. Obviously in marketing, there's acquisition, there's air cover, demand generation. I, in particular, spent a lot of my career in product marketing, and so the focus and the collaboration with sales, I think, is a little bit stronger there than maybe other functions in marketing. But for me, like I said before, regardless of the title, it's all about finding and growing revenue.
Yeah, I know you have a little bit more product marketing experience than probably a lot of people who have been in your now shoes. That's something that when I came to this company, I was a product marketer as well. Having not been one prior to that, it was quite a steep curve of, well, we're a tech product, so obviously tech, but a lot of rules that you just have to know, table stakes. There's a lot of compliance, there's legalities, there's all of that stuff. And then there's also I know we have to give the sales team leads because I'm under the marketing team, but it's not so much that, it's also that this enterprise deal that we're chasing down, they need 3 layers of documentation that we didn't even think of yet. And who does that fall to? It's product marketing, because they are the bridge between that and what goes outward facing. So that was very interesting to me. So what do you take forward from your product marketer days into what you do right now?
Well, I first of all, I think where product marketing is defined correctly, which we could talk about that too, because it gets defined in a lot of different ways, some narrowly, some broadly, but where it's defined correctly, and when I say that, it really means your job as a product marketer is ultimately to grow the product line revenue. And so you're thinking about not just the outbound stuff, sales, marketing, success, support. You're also thinking about inbound, meaning what's going into the products that we're building for the market that we're serving. And so it really is a broad, where it's defined correctly, I think it's a really broad discipline that's probably, in my opinion, one of the best roles when it's defined that way, and also one of the hardest, just because the surface area and the collaboration that's required to do what you have to do. Because in most cases, you're the only one in the company who's literally thinking end to end about a specific product line, unless the company only has one product, and then it's a little bit easier. But in a multi-product company, product marketing, if you're accountable to revenue, literally is the only kind of general manager thinking about that product line end to end. And for me, that's really exciting, but it also makes the goal challenging. And then how that relates to where I am now in my career, when it's defined like that, clearly you're thinking very much about sales and revenue. And so as a CRO, it was a very logical extension of the things that I'd already been doing, a lot of my product marketing roles.
Yeah, I can totally see that. We had in my early days trying to learn the function basically as a first timer, it was quite overwhelming at first to go, yeah, I know that we need this maybe this data sheet, something like that, for a sales specific purpose and then an onboarding purpose. Those are two separate entities.
Yes,
But also we have to consider what should we have on the website as a pre-customer notion that tells you everything you should know. What then should we have as a sales motion about that same thing? And then what about customers? And then the new releases, where does that impact all of those things along the whole line?
that's
And where
right.
I'd not really been dealt with that before, I would, you know, I publish podcasts and things like that. I didn't have to consider customer success or the support team or the inbound, like whether we're going to get 20 phone calls that day because something happened or any of that. So it was you learn to deal with like the whole width and breadth of the company, which was a good learning curve for me. But I'd like to ask you this. When I started doing that, the very first product marketer week that I had in my career, one of the things that was said was many companies struggle to define who owns product marketing, which team should it fall under. I'd like to know what you think of that.
I think it's I hate this answer. It depends, but this one is definitely it depends. I can
Mm-hmm.
tell you in my product marketing career, you said, product marketing is reporting through marketing. I think earlier on, at least that's where you're at right now, maybe or have been. And I certainly have been in that arrangement as well, but I've also been on product marketing that reports into product and engineering. I've also been on product marketing that effectively reports through the sales side, CRO as well. And I can think of one company that I worked in a product marketing capacity where I saw all three of those, and then I came full circle at the end. This was within a 4-year period. And the reasons for product marketing to be in each one of those departments was for a very strategic reason. So if you think about it, product marketing, there's a lot of complexity to have to communicate to the market. The dangerous part about reporting to marketing is you can tilt a little bit too much towards lead gen, demand gen, top of funnel, and that can create some conflicts. On the other side, if product marketing is reporting into a CRO or sales, you might tilt maybe too heavily towards the current quarter's sales objectives. And then you get in the business of, like you're saying, hey, we got a deal we're trying to close this quarter. Product marketing, can you produce these 3 or 4 things? It can be very short-term focused, and that's not a great thing for product marketing either. And then from a product and engineering standpoint, that's also a strategic place for product marketing to be. It's often to create what I call forward tension, which is kind of product marketing is there to be the voice of the buyer persona, where product teams can sometimes get over-rotated on the user persona and not necessarily understand the buyer persona. And those may or may not be different. They may in some cases be the same, but they're very different in terms of what's valued in a product that somebody's considering for purchase. And so that putting product marketing and product and engineering creates a lot of that market reality that's a lot closer to product and engineering. And so I do think just the example that I gave you there should give you a sense of how strategic product marketing is when the function is defined correctly, because it's one of the few functions you can place in all of these different areas to drive different dynamics and different outcomes within the business. And for me, that's another really interesting thing about product marketing, but also, again, one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted, I will say, because
Absolutely not.
when I first joined, very much the first thing that I learned was I was told you are in the center of the company, which in many ways is great. You're exposed to a lot, you see a lot, you're aware of pretty much everything, but also you're involved with everything. And that's also kind of, in at the deep end is what I'll call it. But it was a good learning lesson. So
Well,
I'm
now
grateful that I did
here's
it.
a good news, Ali, is that you're in a good company as it relates to the definition of product marketing's role when they say that that is at the center of the company. So not every company places that kind of premium on product marketing, and that's where you get product marketing that is just about messaging or sales collateral or maybe training and enablement. And that, in my opinion, is a more tactical, narrowly defined role for product marketing. But if you're hearing the company say, hey, you're at the center of the company, that's a good thing, because it usually means that you really are thinking about being the product line business owner. And that comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of accountability. But for me, that's the only way product marketing should really be done.
It was good fun, and now I moved around in the team a little bit, but good fun memories. But I'd like to switch gears on you. I'd like to kind of
Sure.
pick. I hate the words pick your brain, but I'd like to take a look at roughly what is your average week or maybe months. That might be a little bit more interesting. Maybe some more things come on to the list over that time frame. What goes on in your general month? So as far as working goes, you're going to have certain recurring meetings. You're going to have new projects that are this quarter or maybe in next month. A couple of things might come up out of the blue. What, generally speaking, would happen to you in any given month? Take the last 30 days or so. Has
Sure.
anything particularly come up?
Well, what I will say is, I kind of grew up doing product marketing at Microsoft and thought I would be there a year, ended up 6 years. And part of the reason was there's just such a good approach to performance management of a business, managing a business by the numbers. One of the things that was important at Microsoft I learned about was what they referred to as the rhythms of the business. You might think of it as business cadences, but there really are some important business rhythms, and that I think apply pretty universally to B2B software go to market. And one of those is an annual cycle. And there's a lot of debate over whether an annual timeline is now too long in today's fast-moving world. But that's another topic. There's certainly the quarterly cadence, which a lot of organizations are still beholden to quota and revenue targets on a quarterly basis. And so that's an important piece. And then to manage throughout the quarter is both, the monthly and even weekly rhythms of the business. So for me, these are some of the consistent things that happen in an otherwise pretty variable schedule, managing all of these different functions. You can imagine the topics are changing pretty quickly and pretty dynamically. And so my typical day-to-day is, there is no such typical. But the one thing that I do definitely have as a recurring business rhythm is sales forecasting, um, uh, business reviews, demand and campaign performance reviews, all of my kind of stakeholder one-on-ones. Those are consistent rhythms that happen from a week-to-week basis. And then I've on a lot of different other calls, because the go-to-market is a highly external-facing role, and just like this conversation here, I'm often talking to people outside of my company, and it might be related to functional topics like this one, or it might be related to business topics, things related to our core business. But that for me is the variety, is a lot of the allure of the role. In fact, going back to product marketing, I know we departed from that discussion, but that's one of the reasons I was attracted to it, is because it never really is the same. You're always figuring something new out, and that element, you know, across all of those consistent business cadences and rhythms, there's still a lot of variability in terms of things that are new, interesting, and things that need to be figured out.
You sound to me like a guy who likes the mental challenge of something new, who I'm fairly bad at doing same things over and over. Once I know how to do something, it's just gone in my brain. I need to, how do I do this faster, better, something else? You sound kind of similar to me in that regard,
Very
because you're
much,
looking for that
yeah.
next thing.
You get to the diminishing return stage, and it's just what it is, diminishing returns. But yeah, I often say in my job, and for what I really like to do, and this applies to the stage companies that I think I can make most impact at, if I'm doing my job well, then it becomes boring for me at some point. If I've gotten past the stage where you're trying to get beyond product market fit into go to market fit, and from startup to scale up, once it gets to the scale and optimize, and I've managed very large businesses. Microsoft, I was managing the Windows desktop business, which was a $1.5 billion business for the P&L that I managed. But the variability comes in a lot of different forms. And so it's not even that the maturity of the business means that you're yet at a steady state and you're ready to optimize. in that case, there was a lot of optimization, but there was also some things that were new and interesting that we're bringing into market, new products. And so, yes, to answer your question, that was a long-winded answer, but yes, I'm very much like you described, where if it gets to the optimized stage, keep the lights on, then yeah, it becomes less interesting.
Got you. Yeah. Now tell me if this is fair or not. I also got from what you said just previous there that you, I get the vibe you'd like to work on the business, not as much for it. Now, obviously, we all work for a business, but the way that you're talking there, I'm not catching the feeling that you're, really deep into each of the deals personally. You're more in the systems process, making sure that the business is
Mm.
operating properly. That's the whole point of the operational level, is to be making sure that it could work without you. Basically, I always worry for that.
It's
There's
a
a
little bit
point,
of
but
that. Yeah, it's a little bit of that. But even at this stage, it's more about designing and not over architecting. That's the other dangerous risk, is you can't put in too much process overhead, because it'll stall out your agility. And so you got to be very careful about too much process at earlier stages. But at the same time, you're building for processes that are at some point going to break, because you're designing for something that's only going to be good for the next 5,000 customers, and then after that maybe the next 20,000. And so there are these break points that you have to kind of trade off. But am I does that mean that I'm not in kind of engagements, as you're saying, like deal engagements with customers and prospects? I love to. That's some of my favorite work that I do, is to actually hear directly from our prospects and our customers. But yeah, you're right. A lot of the role that I'm at is definitely about architecting appropriately process that'll allow us to get to the next milestone, and then not create too much headwind when it's time for that process to break, and to get to the next milestone.
yeah, difficult balance because there's nothing like FaceTime with a customer or a prospect. That's, you got to have that lifeblood. Otherwise, how do you know any of the stuff that you're designing and thinking of is there? But
Relevant.
obviously, you have to balance out what else you have, because, like you say, I imagine CRO, you're going to have numerous direct reports who are kind of doing that stuff that you'd like to do. It's appropriate for you to be there. How often do you get to go on to come into a deal or go meet a customer, that sort of stuff?
Well, so I was just even last week at a partner event, and so I got to do. That's my favorite, because I can kind of do a speed dating. I got to do 8 roundtables. It was an event called CX Effect. Really good partners within the call center and customer experience space, and it was more of a uh, executive roundtable type of venue. But that was great, because I got to talk about some of what we do at Krisp, and I got to hear from a lot of potential prospects and customers. And so for me, it was much more of an opportunity for me to learn about their businesses, and not necessarily have to, we're not talking about a specific sales engagement or an opportunity. And so I do like those formats, which aren't necessarily within the scope of a sales engagement, but are very much talking to the market, talking to prospects, talking to customers.
Gotcha. Yeah, I haven't done very many events in my career, I must say. Being in the UK, a lot of them are in the States, the big ones. The UK and Europe is kind of dry for that. But a lot of people who I talk to really rave about events very well. So that one sounds like it was great. Have you ever bought into the really big ones? I mean, the
Yeah,
Dream
sure.
Forces and those, they sound extraordinarily expensive, but when you get into bigger budgets, it's not quite as much of a deal.
Yeah, I think you always, with events in general, you just have to be very thoughtful about what you're hoping to get out of the event. And a lot of it is going to be acquiring new contacts, and hopefully new contacts within your ICP, within your buyer persona profiles. And so you do have to be thoughtful about which events you're at, because they can get pretty pricey. If that's the only thing that you're doing, uh, it's sometimes hard to justify. But one thing I can tell you is pretty universally true. Yes, I've been to Dreamforce. Microsoft had a ton of massive events. Uh, been to big service now, their knowledge events. Like these are pretty massive events, and you can kind of get lost in the fray a little bit. But the one thing that I can say is universally true. I don't think I've ever come out of any event, whether it's more intimate or larger event, where I don't feel like I've learned something and I'm invigorated and re-impassioned or impassioned for the first time about something that I'm doing. And so that's a really important piece of the go-to-market, is the community, and to engage with the community.
Yeah, I'd like to go to HubSpot. for that reason. A lot of the time,
Yeah.
I know the first day is usually their new feature rollout. Cool, it's
Right.
their event. But you know, after that, the speaker caliber is pretty high, and for that sense, I do always hear people say, you know, I hadn't thought about ABM in this particular context that I'd heard about at the event and never previous. So a lot of that kind of stuff, I think we in Europe we badly miss. Not to throw shade at other events, but I'll have to work on that. So a little bit of a switch gear for you again. I wanted to ask a little bit about, as you've gone through your career, not necessarily the career moves that you've made, but what do you think in your particular case has helped you climb the ladder? What sort of skills have you lent in towards which have helped you perform to the level where you become a viable person who gets the other job, the promotion, and so on? It's not so much be great with your boss, because that's career individual, but you know, you have to be able to produce. What do you think it is that's helped you produce?
So I'll channel with my answer here some of the feedback that I've heard from executives that I've reported to, managers that I've reported to, and I think these have lent themselves well to my career development and trajectory throughout the years. One of which is, in the way it was articulated to me, is, hey, I know with you, Jake, you're always going to think about the business first, then your team, then yourself. And I hadn't really thought about it in that way, but I thought, yeah, you know, that's always true. I try to, in my thinking, first ask the question, what is going to be most beneficial for the business? And I think anybody who's got that orientation is going to be set up for success. The other thing that has, I think, helped me throughout my career is that part of what we talked about earlier, which is I do tend to get bored if I'm sitting stagnant for too long. And earlier in my career, that's one of the core ethos of Microsoft. And part of the reason that they have such a strong business model is because they don't create any dependencies with any kind of single person or single executives. A lot of the higher potential employees are encouraged and expected to take on new roles every, let's call it, 2 to 3 years. And I think that desire to continue to learn and to be curious is going to serve somebody well in their career no matter what. What I often will provide as coaching and guidance to my own reports is, you know, I always know when somebody's going to be successful and going to advance when they're not coming to ask about their promotion, and they're coming to ask about what are the new challenges that they can take on, and what are the new things that they can do to contribute to the business. And I think that's really important, is that mindset. So those are some of the attributes that I think have lent themselves to my success. And then I'll just say, from a more of a background experience and learning standpoint, I do think it's, for me, helped a lot based on where I've chosen to focus my career in early stage venture-backed startup, to get that education and understanding of how term sheets work and how venture capital would assess a potential investment and those kind of things. I think for me, I've taken that as a really important piece of my career in looking at any new job or new role or new company that I'm going to join. I tend to look at it through that lens, and I think a lot of my experience doing that, both at school and in my jobs, have lent themselves to that experience, which has helped me, especially kind of build a career that's earlier stage from larger company environments.
So you feel that you've been able to judge well what companies might be going places and would be really good place to join. Obviously, Microsoft is slightly beyond that judgment. It's just obvious.
Well, that was part of it. It was like, hey, this one used to be a small company, has become massively successful. So part of my post-MBA MBA was, like I said, I'm going to learn here a year of what it looks like when you're now at scale. And you know, Microsoft has a way of doing that, but a year turned into 6 years. So yeah, it's much like you say. It's you know, what can you take away even in large company environments that's going to ultimately help you get to the destination? And for me, that was to get to an earlier stage environment at some point in my career.
So when you've worked in the smaller companies that you've been at versus the Microsoft, which is as big as it gets, obviously they're very different working environments because of the size, the revenue, the products, all of that stuff, the global team versus the local team. What's one thing that you've taken from both sides?
Mm.
Because for me to work in a majorly massive company like that, I think I feel I would drown in bureaucracy and that stuff, but I would learn a lot of patience with that, which I don't
Yeah,
yet
that's
have.
true.
And then
That's true.
conversely, I have a lot of pace and speed. I can think really quick. That'd help me in the other environment in some cases too. So what would you do from yours?
Um, yeah, it's a really good question. Part of the reason I wanted to, like I said, spend what I thought would be a year at Microsoft is because I really did want to understand what is it look like and feel like in that kind of environment. I had never spent time. I'd interned at IBM, so I kind of got a feel for that. But I too have a disdain for bureaucracy and for things that aren't really having an impact. And my patience is also very low for that. It's not a virtue that I have. So um, I think part of what for me was interesting and what kept me learning there was, as I mentioned before, the approach to managing business, the performance management approach, the balanced scorecard approach to managing business. It used to be kind of an inside joke at Microsoft at that time that Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, the CEO then, when they would come to review the business, they would kind of take you to what was called math camp because these guys were like, like spreadsheets in their heads. They could very quickly look at a huge data set and come out with insights and at the same time errors if that were the case. So there was a very high bar for that type of acumen in managing the business, and I think that helped me learn quite a bit more than I would have had I gone to an earlier stage startup, certainly at that stage in my career. And that was something that I've definitely taken away from that experience, and it's been massively helpful in its application in early stage startup.
What about the other side? What do you take from the smaller companies now?
Yeah, I've seen so many different types, right? And the I'll say two things. One I kind of touched on before, um, which is no go to market is the same. And you might think, okay, I'm within the same industry. It's a B2B SaaS offering, and we're largely selling to the same customers, and it could be a totally different go to market. Um, just as an example, I was tapped to build out at that time a non-existent partner and alliance program for HighSpot, my former employer, and I had managed partner relationships and channel go-to-market before at Microsoft. I had all of the acronyms, OEMs, VARs, VAPs, DISTIs, right? Like, oh, okay, I know what a partner go-to-market is. All of that was thrown out the window because none of that really applied to how effective partner go-to-market looked like for HighSpot. And so it was almost like I had to throw out everything I thought I knew and completely start from scratch. And so what I have learned for startups is there is no copy paste playbook. You can't just, say, oh yeah, I've seen this before and now I'm gonna pull out the thing that worked then and apply it here. You have to be very careful with that kind of approach or mentality. There's always some really good best practices and things you picked up and learned throughout your career, but with startup in particular, and with just the dynamic nature of the tech market right now, everything's changing all the time. So the minute you think you might have the answers and know the best practices, they're going to change. And so you just have to be, I think that's what startup has taught me more than anything, is you really have to have an applied approach. You can't rely too much on past experiences that have been successful.
Great little piece there. Okay, cool. I got one more question for you, and then we have two quick segments before we end up. When you got into Microsoft, when you left school and you got into the professional world, did you have a goal, like to meet a certain job title or to have done a certain thing? Because for a lot of people in maybe a marketer's seat, you want to be CMO, or
Yep.
there's certain flagship titles. I want to be my own CEO or whatever it is. Did you have that? Do you have that? Are you working towards something?
Um, I, I'm not caught up on titles too much, but the one title that for me conveys the kind of mentality that I would want to embrace anywhere, whether I'm starting my own company, whether I'm at a massive company like Microsoft, is the kind of idea of general manager, GM as a title. And the mentality for me means really you are the one that gets to make the strategic decisions. You're the one that gets to execute and is responsible and accountable for executing those decisions. You have all the levers in the world, and it also implies a level of autonomy that's required in order for you to do what's needed. Again, whether that's big company or whether it's your own company, startup of one. So that for me, I won't say like I want to be a GM one day, but in terms of what that title conveys, that's absolutely what I've been interested in any role in my career. I want to kind of have that general manager mentality. And so even my very first product marketing roles at Microsoft, that was the kind of mentality you were expected to have. And so that's what I'm saying. I think for me, I knew I'd found a really good career path, and I started to build around that. But no, I didn't have a specific timeline or destination for like, I want to be a CXO or what have you by X age or anything like that. None of that was in my plan. Just that I would be able to have great experiences building and contributing to building great businesses.
What I get from that is you weren't trying to be an excellent leader. You were trying to be a very well-rounded operator.
Yes.
Who can do each side of the coin.
Yeah, and this is a tricky one because earlier in everybody's career, right? I mean, you think about especially directors, and that can be a place where you can get stuck because you're so prized and rewarded on the executional aspects and the operational aspects. And then as you can move, or if you are going to move beyond director into a leadership role, you really have to go beyond that, and you do have to have skills that lend themselves to more leadership kind of qualities. Certainly, strategic leadership, but also the organizational people leadership. All of those aspects become really important.
Great stuff. Okay, Jake, I'm going to ask you about a terrible mistake that you may have made in your career. So, in the next couple of minutes, I'll meander through this, give you some time to think. Could you walk us through a time where you have made a mistake in your career, but something that, it might seem innocuous or it might be a pretty bad one, maybe lost a big client or a top performer left because of whatever reason, and you've had to react and sort it out. Something come to mind?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's probably a myriad examples that come to mind where I had to react and sort it out. I'll say one of the biggest. I don't know if I would articulate it as a mistake, but it was a mistake in the level of investment and for the appropriate phase of a new product go to market. And this was when I worked for a company called Aptio that's now, it's now been recently acquired by IBM. So it's gone through that whole life cycle. But early days, we thought we were going to develop a new product offering that would basically integrate with ServiceNow. And we worked very collaboratively with ServiceNow and the executive team there. And we started to develop and build the product and bring it to market. And then within the next 6 months, we learned that ServiceNow was going to be moving in and competing directly in our space. And so they had kind of used some time to collaborate and learn. And we had just been caught flat-footed in the fact that we were now competing with who we thought we were partnering with. And that happens. This is a pretty typical thing within technology business. And so I'll say it was a curveball, and the mistake might have been that we made more investment that we should have at the stage that we should have. And how it was corrected is by actually partnering more closely with them on the offering. And so we nestled in and we got a little bit deeper with this integration, and we learned more about their business. And I think that ultimately benefited both of us, but that we were a little bit behind the gun when we initially started in our collaboration there. So it was a learning lesson for sure.
So that's an interesting one. So you felt like you were kind of dealt a curveball, but then you managed to get a 180 on it. How did you approach that with them? Because a lot of people probably wouldn't have thought about it, given my gut feeling.
Well, so when it comes to partnerships, you can have direct competitors, and then you can have complementary partners that are sometimes perceived competitively. But I think for the most part, you're looking for where is there going to be complementary value, and even if there's maybe some direct competitive friction that's there, you focus on the areas where you'll see mutual value to your customers. And so that's where we were focused very much on a specific persona, the help desk, service desk owner, and their ability to get financial metrics in this case. And I think that was something that both of our products together could do uniquely. And so that's where we focused on the value of the joint offering versus the areas of potential competitive friction.
Very good. Okay, so last minute or so, are you ready for a couple quick fire questions
Oh,
before I
sure,
let you go?
sure. Let's do
All
it.
right. So we ask everybody this. What is the largest team that you have managed? How many people?
You already asked me that, I think. Oh,
I did,
yes.
but we're going to give it a go.
You asked me that before we were recording. Okay. Uh, I think it's around 35, 40, something like that.
There we go. 35. Okay. Blended average, if possible. What is the average deal size that you think you've worked on across your career?
Oh my gosh, across all of the businesses, that's a super hard one with a huge distribution and variance, but the average is going to be somewhere in the order of 70,000 to 100,000
70 to
average deal size.
100,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's call it 85.
85.
Something like
Split the
that.
difference. There we go.
Okay. What would you say is your, as a professional, special skill? What's your superpower?
Um, uh, the creation process of business. So however you want to articulate that, if creative thinking, creative application, I often say I like to think about solutions, and we can always think about problems, but there's always more than one solution to any problem, and that's the fun that I have. So I guess creative thinking would be the way to call that.
I like that, or I'm getting acumen as well, as you
There
say,
you go.
bit
There
of
you go.
both. Okay, cool. And rate your creative thinking skills out of 100 for me. 100 being awesome, 0 being you're pretty bad.
Yeah, okay. If I'm going to do a letter grade, I guess it would be somewhere in the B range, but I modestly will put a 79%. I'll give myself a C plus because I believe there's always room for improvement in anything that we're doing.
I like it. Good stuff. What about your coaching and mentorship skills?
Oh, also about the same. That's one of the things I'm passionate about. I think I've got a lot of good strengths there, but I'm always learning. I'm learning every day in every interaction. So I'll also peg myself at a C plus, solid C plus, 79%.
Good stuff. Okay. And what about people management?
So people management, that goes beyond just the development and the coaching. That's what I would consider team design, org design, roles, responsibilities, incentive structure, all that stuff. I'll give myself an 82% there, a little bit better, a little bit
82.
better. Yeah.
Very nice. 3% better than the previous. Good stuff.
3%. Still work to be done though.
What time do you get up in the morning?
Oh, geez. I don't like to think about it, but my alarm wants me to get up at about 5 a.m. every single morning. Whether my alarm is successful in doing that, that's a different question. But yeah, I've been an early riser now throughout, the last 10 years of my career. And it wasn't a natural transition, I'll just say. But I do appreciate the kind of isolation of not having a bunch of meetings where you can do some focused thinking and work time. That's definitely important. Still
I'll
early,
just write 5 a.m. then because that's what you said off the rip. But yeah,
5 a.m.
putting me to shame a little bit there. I'm not even going to reveal my own alarm clock time.
Don't need to. I'm jealous.
Okay, what did you want to be when you were a kid? What was your dream job?
And geez, early days, I definitely knew I was going to be either a professional baseball player or a professional race car driver. And I think it turned out the older I got, maybe becoming a mathematician sounded more realistic. But then when I got to college, I realized, well, outside of being a professor or a PhD and maybe an actuariist, being a mathematician is maybe more narrow than I wanted to go. So I found a love in the applied mathematics of business, and off my career went from there with finance and information systems and technology and business strategy and all the things that came with it.
It all makes sense now that you say that. I got you. Out of interest, who was the baseball player hero or the race car driving hero?
It was Darryl Strawberry, was New York Mets back in that day, number 18. Man, he was fun to watch. But
I'm not strong on baseball players, but I'll look them up.
that's gonna
If it's
date me though,
NFL,
right?
I'm good, but any
Oh,
other
good for
American
you.
sport, I'm not too good, not too strong.
I'll look up the 1986 Mets. Yeah, that's quite a good story. I think there might even be an ESPN 30 for 30 on them.
Good stuff. Okay, and the last question: if anyone comes to mind, who could you recommend to us that we should have on the podcast that you wouldn't mind introducing us to?
Sure. I can think of two guys I worked with, actually in multiple different companies and roles throughout my career that I just think have a super interesting and unique way of thinking about things. One is a guy named Ashish Damdari, who I went to business school with and is now CEO of a company called Relevo that he started. But he's like myself, seen very large and very small throughout his career. So he's really just got a unique perspective. And another guy that I worked with also at Aptio, at HighSpot, and even outside of that, a guy named Gerard Green, who's now, I think he's CMO of a early stage company called Vivun, VIVUN, focusing on solutions for pre-sales and sales engineering. But also really unique perspective. He actually had experience as a teacher, as an analyst, so a really unique background and unique perspectives that I think he could lend you. So those are the two names that come top of mind for me.
Brilliant. Well, I will drop you a message to clarify those names and see if I can get a little introduction there. But thank you for those. Before you jump, thanks very much for coming on. This was great fun. I've learned a few things myself. Hopefully everybody listening or watching has as well. But where could people find or follow you if they wanted to say, hey, remind me about that thing you said, teach me that, remind me this, I have a question? Where could they follow you?
Yeah, I'm somewhat responsive on LinkedIn, so you can try me there to DM me, but I'm probably going to be faster if you send me an email, jake@krisp, with a K, KRISP.ai.
Perfect. All right. Well, Jake, pleasure. Thank you very much. Hope anybody listening had a great time, and we'll see you on the next one.
Hey, thank you, Ollie. I really appreciate it.